Yeah, I just let it happen. Oh, we're live. Welcome, everybody, to episode 41 of Sports Shorts. I'm your host, Bobby Hacker, and our guest today is Bob Wallace, partner at Thompson Coburn in St. Louis, and a longtime member of the SLA, and much like me, a former president of the Sports Lawyers Association. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you for being the ex-president's like in The Few Good Men, where the guy says, I have no authority and no responsibility. It's perfect.
Well, it's good. I look forward to pretty soon being able to sit at the back of the room with the ex-presidents.
Right. And just kibitz.
And just kibitz, exactly. So, Bob, the way we like to start off our little program here is, obviously you're a partner in a law firm, but if you could sort of walk us through kind of the work that you're doing these days and tell us a little bit about your professional path to getting to where you're at.
Well, I'm going to reverse your question a little bit and say, start with my professional path, because that kind of explains a little bit about what I'm doing right now. I have started out my career as a lawyer in a law firm that represented the St. Louis football Cardinals. And probably a lot of people in your audience don't even know there was a St. Louis football Cardinals. But I was a counsel for them, started in 1981. I negotiated all their player contracts for 10 years, helped them move to Arizona when they relocated in 1987. Spent 3-4 years commuting back and forth from Phoenix to St. Louis. Then I got a job with the Philadelphia Eagles as assistant to the president, and I worked and I again did all the player contracts and some other legal work. This was in 1991, and the NFL was just beginning to become a marketing giant back in 1991. Now, when I started in 1981, I don't believe the St. Louis football Cardinals even had a marketing department. So I did that for Philadelphia from 91 to 95, when Norman Brayman was the owner, and he sold the team to Jeff Lurie in 1995. And then I came back to St. Louis to work for John Shaw and Georgia Frontiere of the Los Angeles Rams, who had relocated or planned to relocate to St. Louis in 1995. And I stayed with the Rams for 15 years, and then I left them when they were sold. So I'd say I have two common threads throughout my career: is my teams that I work for get sold and they relocate. And I'm not sure either one of those things are great for career longevity. But I was here in St. Louis for 15 years when Georgia Frontiere passed away, I guess in 2008 or 9. Her kids didn't really want to keep the team. They sold it to Stan Kroenke, who was a minority owner, and I left in 2012, and then came to Thompson Coburn to try to start or jumpstart their sports law practice.
That's great. I mean, part of the experience must have been, and again, I think a lot of our audience might not understand what relocation was like 20 years ago versus what goes on today. But it seems more like the old Bob Arce pull up the trailers to the back of the stadium and drive to a new city.
Well, the Cardinals were the first. Yes, that's the way that it used to be, where Bob Arce took the Colts out of Baltimore and moved them to Indianapolis, and he did it in the kind of the middle of the night. Bill Bidwell, who was a longtime NFL owner and a very traditional guy, he went through the process, and we filed it. Again, it was one of the not the highlights of my career, but one of the more exciting things was relocating a franchise. It was sort of getting like a PhD in franchise operations, because we moved from St. Louis and we had to find a place to practice. We had to do a stadium lease with Arizona State University. And so it was a great experience. The highlight, I would say, was winning the Super Bowl, but in 1999.
Greatest show on turf.
Greatest show on turf. But we filed an application. One of the things that people in St. Louis will tell you is that Bill Bidwell's application to relocate from St. Louis to Phoenix was, not an unfriendly application, as opposed to what happened when the Rams and Stan Kroenke moved, where there was a lot of, bad words said about St. Louis. Bidwell's application, which I authored, basically just said we needed a new stadium. He never complained about the fan support. And I would have thought if the powers that could be in St. Louis would have ever come together and made a real proposal for a stadium, he would have never left. He liked St. Louis.
And also St. Louis, again, for our younger viewers, which is probably everybody besides you and me. St. Louis is was it an original NFL franchise or an early on franchise?
No, it really wasn't. St. Louis the Cardinals are an original NFL franchise.
Oh, but they were the Chicago Cardinals.
They used to be the Chicago Cardinals, and then due to some television, two teams in Chicago back in the '60s, they didn't think was that going to be that successful. That was before the NFL really took off as a what it is now. So they convinced the Bidwell brothers, Bill and Stormy, which was they were brothers, to move to St. Louis, and they did.
So now we've got you. You've started this help the last 10 years or so at Thompson Coburn. Essentially, I would guess would it be right to say building out a sports practice a little bit?
Yeah, when I came to St. Louis, I came to Thompson Coburn. They had done a lot of bond work for facilities and stuff like that. Help with the construction of the Dome at America Center, it's called now. At one point, it had no name, and then it became the TWA Dome, and then it became the Edward Jones Dome. They had done some work for that. They had done some work with University of Missouri stadiums and construction there, as well as Busch Stadium, both the new Busch stadiums. So they had some some groundwork on sports, and they said, well, you know a lot of people, you're well connected in the sports industry. How would you like to come over and see if you could build the practice? Not easy. St. Louis is not, unfortunately, the leagues like hiring law firms from New York and Washington. And so they don't really like us Midwest, us flyover states as much. And I try to tell them that, we do the same work for less price in the Midwest than they do in LA and New York. And, one thing about Thompson Coburn, it's the largest law firm in St. Louis, with more lawyers here in St. Louis. There are bigger firms that are national that have a presence in St. Louis. But there are a lot of smart people and do really good work.
Yeah, and so what are some of the areas that you guys are working in? I know that over the last couple of years, really, I look at it from the perspective of rights deals in sports. And you go back to, when Mr. Murdoch flipped the switch in '94 and offered an obscene amount of money that is pennies today to get the rights to the NFL. But we've seen so many changes so quickly in sport on the business end. It's a matter of just keeping up, because it seems that every year or two, there's a new area of what comes under the umbrella of sports law. I'm thinking about NIL right now as sort of maybe the hottest topic, and then NFTs and a series of other alphabets that are out there.
Yeah, I think you're correct. The NFL is a little different because it's not, the amateurs, or what is so-called, amateur athletes. So, they've always had, their players are free to make marketing deals where college players weren't for many years. So, it's a little bit different. I think that's a really exciting area. I was doing some work on some NIL stuff and, just trying to do my due diligence and see what was in the space. And when you ask people, nobody really knew. It was, you can't pay for play. That was basically the restrictions on NIL. And I'm not sure they still got a real handle on what it was, but it finally gives the student athlete a chance to, make some money off his own name.
Legitimate,
right? Legitimate money off his own name.
I think
or her own name, and the women
right,
athletes and the women athletes are doing to some extent better than the men.
Yeah, that's what's really interesting in this whole world of, here we are, and we've talked about it a lot through our organization, 50 years after Title IX, and sadly, we're still talking about firsts. You think after 50 years, you wouldn't have so many firsts. Right. But we do. But what's been interesting with NIL is everybody was talking about, the money and these players we're going to get and whatnot. But you've seen a couple women athlete in basketball and volleyball signing significant deals, which is, I think, a really good result of what NIL has done.
Right.
But without national legislation, it's like a lawyer's sort of dream, nightmare scenario. It's like a conflicts question. Okay, where is the athlete? Where is the school? Where is it all taking place? Who controls? Is there a state law? Isn't there a state law?
No, how important is football or basketball in that state? And does that determine how strict the laws are going to be on determining what a student athlete is allowed to do? Or how important it is to make sure you have the best recruiting class, so you're going to have less restrictive limitations on what an athlete can do.
Right. And we saw it recently in California. I don't know if you read this. There's a sort of prominent athletic powerhouse high school here that has just been offered an NIL deal for its football team.
I didn't read this story, but I did see the headline.
So it's a company that's basically saying, oh, you're part of this high school football team, post about this product and you'll each get this many $1,000. Now, when I was a high school athlete, I think I had to pay for most everything that I got.
Right.
And now
you also run 6'4" and then run the 40 and 4.3.
Right, exactly. But you're looking at college sports right now, and they're saying it's, again, we're lawyers and words really matter. And everybody's saying, oh, it's not pay to play. I think we're on the razor's edge of really what that definition is now.
Right, Bobby, it really is pay for play. You just can't call it that.
Right, because it's you look at different states. I mean, the Florida law, for example, is pretty wide open, and it's different than California law, for example. So if you have whatever it is now, 20 some states, and I don't think there's necessarily they all line up all of these different rules, but it's creating a lot of work for lawyers, I think.
I think as it matures, it'll create more work.
And look, you're a former college athlete, and we're now looking at college sports. And for a while, I was thinking, oh, these, we were left with Power 5 conferences, and were they going to leave the NCAA? And after the recent SEC deals and the most recent Big Ten deals, which appear to be nowhere near over yet, you're maybe looking at 2 power conferences. And it's just changing the face of college sports. What do you think the NC2A's role is going to be moving forward?
Well, I'm a pretty harsh critic a lot of the way college athletics operates. I find that the student athlete, my friends in the NCAA world, I tell them we should call it athletes and capitalize all the letters in athlete, and students in very small. Because when student athletes are going to play basketball games on Tuesday across the country, they cannot be students. And both of us went to good colleges, and we could say to ourselves, do we remember exactly the lessons that we learned, or do we remember sitting in a classroom or sitting in the dorm having discussions with people about topical issues? And I think it's the latter. And until I'd say to these guys, you're trying to solve problems by putting a Band-Aid over a large sore. So let's put as Jim Fossil said, let's put all our chips in the center of the table and come up with a new system based on what's happening in 2022 and what's going to happen in 2032, and see if we can have a system that makes sense. And that means taking all the established sort of, well, they're student athletes, or they're getting a free education, and putting that on the table, and let's having a real discussion about whether that is the perfect model. So maybe the perfect model is that you separate college football and college basketball from the university, and that they're not student athletes, they're employees and they play. I'm not saying that's the way to go, but I don't think that we cannot discuss that at this point.
Well, clearly, when the head of the NLRB last year said that, in her opinion, these student athletes are employees, and she would rule in favor, that shifts the whole paradigm. Because potentially, if you have what I like to call Northwestern 2, a group of college athletes get together and say, we want to organize, It seems like the NLRB is going to say, yep, you can.
Justice Kavanaugh said, bring it on. I'm willing to rule on your favor on a whole bunch of this stuff. So yeah, I think the game is going to change. The NCAA has always been a step behind the ball, and they need to get in front of the ball and be leaders instead of followers. And by being leaders, they need to, again, as I said, look at everything and see what is it that we really need to do to improve the game, improve the atmosphere.
And I think I agree with you. I think that college football, particularly the FBS, the higher, what we used to call D1, and college basketball are just going to walk away from the NCAA, it would seem, and create their own sort of, for lack of a better name, a semi-pro league, because you're getting paid and you're working. I mean, recently, I forget which was the university where everyone is going to get a $36,000 NIL deal if you're on the team. So in addition, can you imagine, in addition to getting free tuition, room and board, and a stipend, you're making $36,000 a year? Now, when you and I went to school, $36,000 a year, we'd buy a house or something. Nowadays, but still, I mean, if you're making a few $1,000s a month with everything paid for as a college student, that's unbelievable.
That's right. I mean, you can actually go out to a movie, go to, other than the campus movie for $2. And some of these kids, from where they're coming from, they may not even be able to afford that $2.
Right. And that's been one of the issues with where I think NIL has really helped, because, I knew a lot of guys I went to school with. They were on full rides to the university, but they didn't have enough money to live. And under the old rules, they couldn't even have a job.
Right.
So you put it all together, it was really tough. But if I'm not going to call out any names, but let's just say there was an era where if you said to a coach or somebody, gee, I really want to go home and see my mom, that maybe miraculously an airplane ticket showed up in your locker after training. And I think now we're legitimizing it. So, a group of guys can make money by saying, hey, every Sunday night we eat dinner at this restaurant, and they take care of the fill in the school's offensive line. So they can legitimately do it and put a few bucks in their pocket. That, I think, makes sense, because what people lose sight of is most of these people, these athletes, men and women, once their college career is over, that's it. The percentage that go on to make a living at it is infinitesimal within the set of all college athletes.
I actually thought about what is the collectives that starting. I think the athletes ought to do collectives and say, we're gonna pool all of our money, and then we're gonna divide it up. And obviously the guy who's bringing in more, he's going to get a little bit more. But every player on the team is going to share in the largesse. Now the university won't like that, because that's going to cut in on some of their marketing dollars if they can deal directly with the players. But what they've always argued, Bobby, is the difference between college and pros is the important name is the one in college is on the front of the jersey, and the pros is the back of the jersey.
That's true.
We'll test that. We'll test that theory.
All right, we have a question from our audience, from our dear friend Professor Ross. So he asks, this you're gonna have to dig into your NFL baggage here. If Roger Goodell had retained you as a special advisor on how to proceed after Judge Robinson's 6-game suspension of Deshaun Watson, what advice would you have given? And what are the politics that you see leading to the NFL settling, and indeed then having Goodell overrule the hearing office?
I think it wasn't a legal decision. It was a PR decision. I actually think that they could have reached this conclusion 11 games earlier than they did. I don't know if they had to take the step that they reached to get there. I actually think they should have either suspended him for 10 or 12 games instead of having him come back after 11 games to play in Houston. I don't know who didn't look at the calendar when they made that decision. Just a terrible decision in my mind. But I think they really wanted to make up their sort of put this behind them. Obviously, 6 games for 24 allegations is insufficient. But and if what we say is that we respect women, and we that was just an insufficient penalty that they gave him. And the NFL, and Rogers is sort of a hanging judge. He that was his reputation, and he was going to come down hard on people. And I think they were disappointed that they didn't. I think this is a reasonable settlement based upon what they were trying to accomplish, which was send a stronger message than they did, but not carry this on indefinitely, which it would have done. I mean, it would have been time. He would have been played if they would have appealed this and sued. He would have played the whole season with this hanging over his head. Now he'll pay a penalty, and he's got to do some work on his brand and the way he presents himself going forward.
Yeah, but it is a little interesting that they come up with this magical 11-game suspension that just so happens to coincide with his new team going to play his old team, which is, let's not lose sight of the fact that Roger Goodell cut his teeth as the marketing guy for the NFL.
Well, that's just bad marketing. I mean, that's just bad marketing. That's like, why? I mean, him coming back is going to be an event in itself. I mean, he's a good player. So him coming back is going to mean something. And the Browns are a pretty good team. They could stay in it without him. I don't know if, Jacoby Brissett can make them a competitive team. But when Deshaun Watson comes back, that's a big story. They've overshadowed it by bringing him back against Houston. And it just is I just think that was a very, very silly decision. And if they did it for a marketing purpose or ratings, that's even worse.
Yeah, well, I wasn't in the room, but I'm betting for the ratings and the promotion of the game and to drive a lot of attention. But there's another more interesting issue going on in the NFL, and I'd really like your thoughts on it, which is recently as part of what we'll just call this sort of the CTE discussion that's going on in the NFL. They recently determined, and it was found out, that they were using a lower baseline for African-American players in the league. And they've adjusted that, which prevented a lot of players from getting benefits. Are we really that far behind that we have to even have this discussion and talk about differences in African-American and Anglo athletes?
The answer, Bobby, is obviously yes, that we're still having just disgusting that this was on the table and that nobody was raising this. No one was standing on the table saying, what is going on here? Until it finally came out. And again, maybe like Deshaun Watson, maybe like some of these other horrible things that happen, they keep it quiet until they have to. But if I was in the room when this discussion was being had, I would have gone absolutely nuts. I would have gone absolutely nuts.
Which raises the other question. Do you think that, we've seen, I don't know if you've seen Hard Knocks or seen what's going on, but they're wearing these, I don't even know what you call them, like these
shells
pads on top of the helmet. I mean, we're a couple of athletes that played collision sports. Do you really think that's helping?
I don't know if it helps, but it can't hurt. And I don't care if it looks funny. Anything that you can do to make the game safer. It's a very dangerous game. When my son played college football, and when they used to, they instituted targeting, I was all for it. They instituted hits to defenseless players being a penalty. I was all for it. Anything that can keep guys safe. These guys are big, they're fast, and they're strong. And if we can do anything that cuts down on immediate injuries and long-term injuries, I'm 100% for it.
Well, I think that's really important, which gets to the bigger issue of you're the man on the street, and I'm saying to you, when do you think youth should start having full contact?
Not young. Now, I mean, you look at Pee Wee football, and they're barely hitting each other. But why? And when they get to be 12, and some kids are bigger than others, why? I mean, I don't think you need to start playing college. I mean, contact football until you're 14, 15 years old.
Right.
Right. I mean, I just don't think, I'm afraid that there's a chance that football could turn into boxing, where the only people that are playing football are poor kids that need it as a way of getting out of their circumstance. And like boxers, and nobody boxes anymore. It's just too dangerous. I mean, except for poor kids that are the toughest kid in the block and like fighting, and they're going to go out. And I say that with the exception of Florida. I mean, of Texas. They'll always play football in Texas. Everybody will play. It won't be socioeconomic. But I fear that the mothers of the world are going to say, "I'm not letting you play." And we have found a diminution in who plays football.
Right. But I think that's true. I think that 14 is the earliest you should be putting pads on. It's just, what people lose sight of, because I think most of the people out there have watched football games or other kind of contact sports, but haven't played it. And they don't really understand that it's not necessarily getting hit in the head. It's like when you're going full speed and somebody hits you and your body stops.
Right.
And everything rattles. That's the real danger that people don't want to talk about, that I think people are finally starting to talk about in sports. And I think you have to do it.
And we celebrate that. We celebrate when somebody gets hit in their back. I guess the NFL and your network and ESPN, they've stopped showing the terrible hits of the day, but still, those are celebrated when a guy really knocks you out, and maybe not, literally knocks you out, but knocks you down, the ball comes out, all that kind of stuff. It's dangerous.
Yeah, well, it's gotten to be exponentially a bigger business. And when recently, as you probably saw, the Dallas Cowboys were valued at $8 billion. You realize that people aren't going to walk away from something worth $8 billion, and they're going to try to keep making it grow and grow and grow.
I'll tell you a story about it. Back in 1986, I went to see Pete Rozelle. The discussion about should we have a minority owner in the NFL. So I went to see Rozelle, and I said, I've got a couple of prominent African Americans that are interested in buying a team. And he says, Bob, he says, we'll probably put these expansion teams up for 150 million. He says, I don't know what the acceleration will be, whether we'll make more money, whether we are overpricing it. God, was he wrong, and God, was I wrong for listening to him.
Well, Pete
was brilliant. Pete
Rozelle lobbied Congress to allow for national broadcasts.
Right.
I mean, if he did nothing else in his career as the commissioner of the NFL, that would be a highlight, because that's what funded the sport ever since.
My first real job was working as a intern in the league office, and I did some work with Val Pinchbeck and Nancy Behar in the NFL office. And one of the things we did was look at blackouts, and this was the beginning of when this was the first time Davis moved from Oakland to Los Angeles, and I was doing research on that. Television was a big part of that discussion.
Yeah. Well, there's all kinds of always fun stuff to talk about. We just touched upon a few, but it was great having a little chat with you.
Thank you for thinking of me, Bobby. It was good to be on with you. You've been doing a great job with all these things. Hopefully people are understanding, what sports lawyers are involved in, talk about our organization and getting involved, and, meeting people like you and I. I mean, I'm in St. Louis, you're in Los Angeles. We probably would have never met but for the Sports Lawyers Association.
Which is great. And for those of you that are watching or will watch it later as it's archived, it's always good to join a great organization like ours. Go to sportslaw.org and become a member. Upcoming, we've got some, stay tuned for every other week sports shorts, and we have some good webinars and stuff coming up. And this November, we're going to be doing a media focused symposium in the first week of November. So tune into that. And next May, will be here in Los Angeles for the Sports Lawyers Association Conference live at JW Marriott at LA Live. And it's going to be a great program. And our theme for this next conference in May is going to be the athlete. So we're focusing on all aspects of the athlete, and that covers a lot of areas and our usual ethics and other highlights. So,
and I'm sure you've said this a number of times during your broadcast about how the association is player agents, non-player agent, league officials, and it's just a great network of people. And you can always pick up the phone and get somebody to say, "Hey, have you worked on this?" and get some. So it's a great organization. One of my favorites.
Couldn't agree more. Bob, thank you for taking the time to be with us today, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Bobby. Talk to you.
Yeah.